Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. They humiliated her during the interview, not knowing that her father was the director. In a large glass and steel building overlooking Manhattan, at the corner of 5th Avenue and 52 Endy Street, Wellington and Chase, one of the most prestigious financial consulting firms on the East Coast, was opening its doors for a selective recruitment day. The elevators kept going up and down, dropping off one by one the future elite, fresh graduates from the country's top universities, Harvard, Yale, Stanford. All dressed to the nines, sporting Swiss watches and tailored suits, bearing last names with double particles or Upper East Side addresses. Maya Thompson, she arrived alone, silently, a file in hand, her discreet silhouette gliding through the marble hall. Aged 24, a graduate of Columbia University with honors, she wore a well-pressed but obviously affordable navy suit, slightly scuffed black shoes, and an old reinforced canvas bag. Her braided hair was tied back in a neat bun, her clear face exuding serenity and determination. She sat down in the waiting room reserved for applicants. The atmosphere was tense, competitive. The other applicants exchanged furtive glances, evaluating one another as if in a silent tournament. They exchanged resumes in hushed tones, compared internships, and the names of famous professors. Maya, on the other hand, kept her eyes fixed on her notes, concentrating. She didn't have the privilege of coming from an influential background. What she did have was an intelligence, its resilience and his belief in his own worth. On the other side of the bay window, in the small room where the recruiters observed the candidates, two figures leaning over the table were talking. Ashley, an HR recruiter with a sharp smile, whispered to her colleague Brandon. "Look at that one. She doesn't even have a leather bag, a crumpled tote bag." Brandon, fitted suit, perfectly slicked hair, sneered. "She looks like she just came from an interview for an assistant position. Honestly, does she really think she'll get a job here? At Wellington?" They giggled silently, writing down a few notes, probably already biased. But Maya, though focused, had heard them. She didn't look up, didn't react. She just took a deep breath. This wasn't the first time she'd been looked down upon. Not the first time her years of hard work had been reduced to an aesthetic judgment. But what they didn't know was that Maya Thompson had been preparing for these kinds of moments her entire life. Her mother, a night nurse for 20 years, had taught her to stand up straight in the face of silent humiliation. Her father, whom she had always seen in sober suits without knowing how influential he was, had passed on to her a phrase that she repeated in her head every time she felt the judgments raining down. The silence of a confident person is louder than the noise of the ignorant. So she smiled. Not for them, for herself, because she knew her worth. And that the interview wasn't just a test, but also a mirror held up to the recruiters themselves. When the interviews began, one by one, the candidates were called into a modern room with glass walls and a long, glossy, light oak table. At each turn, the recruiters were cordial, sometimes even enthusiastic, laughing with some candidates, nodding complicitly at the Ivy League profiles, impressed by family names or anecdotes of internships in the offices of influential uncles. Maya, meanwhile, waited silently, alone in her chair, her gaze fixed but peaceful, her hands folded in her lap. Time seemed to slow down for her, as the others left with smiles or confident expressions. Finally, after more than 2 hours, it was his turn. She entered the room and greeted politely. No smile was returned. No handshake, no warm eye contact. Brandon was hunched over his phone. Ashley was adjusting her blonde curls while consulting a notepad. She sat up straight and dignified. Ashley barely looked up, then, in an icy tone. "Ashley. Very good. You put Columbia on your resume. Did you really study there?" Maya, calmly, her voice calm but firm, replied. "Maya. Yes. I studied at Columbia on a full scholarship. I graduated top of my class with a degree in applied economics." That answer should have sparked interest, questions, a modicum of respect. But Brandon smirked, slowly straightening. "Brandon. A stock marketer? Interesting. And you really think you're ready to work here at Wellington and Chase? We're not talking about just another research firm here. We're talking about pressure, international clients, 70-hour work weeks, multi-million-dollar decisions. Maya didn't flinch. She had heard worse, experienced worse. Maya. I studied while working part-time for 4 years. I did 2 summer internships at investment banks. And I'm perfectly comfortable with the demands. But Ashley, annoyed, leaned forward, arms crossed. Ashley. You know, Maya. We're not just looking for good students. We want people who understand the codes of the business world. Who can talk to our customers without looking like they just came from a community center. She paused, then added, even more abruptly. Don't you have a mentor in the sector? A recommendation from a well-known partner? A network to show us? Maya was silent for a few seconds. She could have said so many things. She could have left his father's name, shut up those 2 arrogant recruiters in 1 sentence. But she didn't. It wasn't her style. She wanted to be judged for what she was worth, not for his name. Maya. I prefer my work to speak for me. Ashley rolled her eyes. Brandon closed his notepad without a word. They didn't ask him the technical question. No practical case, no customer scenario, no analytical evaluation as they had done for the others. Instead, they dismissed her with a vague formula. Brandon. Very well, thank you. We will get back to you. Maya stood up, thanked them anyway, and left the room without revealing anything. As soon as she walked through the door, Brandon huffed and chuckled. Brandon. She'll probably end up in customer service, if she's lucky. Ashley, typing on his phone. Or at the reception desk of a law firm. That kind of profile doesn't last a week here. What they didn't know was that behind the walls of that same floor, just a few steps away, in a plain office with half-drawn blinds, was the general manager and founder of Wellington and Chase, Jonathan Thompson. A discreet man, with a quiet authority, whom few young recruits dared to approach. That day, he had remained in the background, observing part of the interviews through the internal screens. He didn't want to intervene. Not right away. He wanted to know how his daughter would be treated without any special treatment. And what he saw was changing the future of the HR department of her business. Not just for Maya. But for all those who, like her, were judged not on their value, but on their appearances, their origins, or the thickness of their address book. That same evening, in an elegant but warm house located in a quiet neighborhood of Brooklyn Heights, Jonathan Thompson met his daughter for dinner. The setting was simple, a large, rough wooden table, 2 still steaming plates, an open bottle of wine, and a gentle, almost complicit silence between a father and his daughter. Jonathan, always impeccably dressed even at home, had taken off his suit jacket but kept his shirt buttoned up. Maya, for her part, had changed, swapping her suit for a loose beige sweater and worn jeans. She seemed calm, but her gaze remained distant. She absent-mindedly stirred her vegetables on her plate. After a few casual exchanges about the day, silence fell. Then Jonathan put down his fork, folded his hands on the table, and asked in a calm but attentive voice. Jonathan. So, how did the interview at Wellington and Chase go? Maya looked up at him. There was hesitation and pride in his gaze, but also a hint of pain. She knew her father loved her deeply, but held more than anything that she should chart her own course. It was he who had insisted that she never uses his name in the professional world, in order to be judged on her merits, not on her heritage. She hesitated for a moment. Then she said softly. Maya. They humiliated me, Dad. Not violently. Not with insults. Just with that tone. That icy contempt. Jonathan frowned slightly. She continued, her voice calm but hurt. Maya. They questioned my education at Columbia. Ashley asked me if I had actually studied there. Brandon made fun of the fact that I was on scholarship. They didn't ask me a single serious question. Not a single test. I was invisible to them. She paused, then continued, looking him straight in the eyes. Maya. And I know you wanted me to make my own way. Not to take advantage of your name. But, today, I felt small. Not because I wasn't good enough. But because they didn't even give me a chance to prove it. Jonathan remained silent for a moment. He looked down, then slowly looked back up. His normally calm face darkened. A mixture of suppressed anger and silent disappointment flashed across his eyes that he wasn't just the CEO of a multinational corporation, he was a father. And a father had just heard that his daughter had been slighted. He stood up slowly and walked to a small desk at the back of the room. There, he picked up his work phone and dialed a number. Jonathan, in a low, firm voice. Linda. I want a meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp. Jupiter Room. All HR managers. All recruiters present today. No one is missing. He hung up. Then he stood silent for a moment, arms crossed behind his back, facing the large bay window overlooking the city lights. Maya stood up as well, looking at him with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. Maya. Dad. I didn't want you to interfere. I just wanted you to know. He turned around, approached her, and placed a firm but tender hand on her shoulder. Jonathan. I let you face the world without a safety net for years. Because I knew you were strong. But when the world looks down on your strength as if it didn't exist, then it's no longer a lesson in self-reliance. It's an abuse I won't let go. He added, in a deep voice. Jonathan. What those two put you through today, how many other young people like you go through it every week, without ever daring to talk about it? Maya felt a surge of emotion rise within her. But she simply nodded. Jonathan, below. Tomorrow, Maya, this won't be an ordinary meeting. Tomorrow, I'm going to remind them that talent can't be bought. It has to be recognized. And they failed to see it. The next morning. At 7:58 a.m., HR managers from Wellington and Chase began to enter the Jupiter Room, the largest conference room at headquarters. Located on the top floor, it offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, but this morning, no one stopped to contemplate the city. The air was heavy, laden with a diffuse unease. Suppositions were whispered. Why this surprise meeting? Why so early? The glass walls reflected their own reflection, crumpled suits, tense faces, avoidant glances. Ashley, the first to enter, immaculate in her ivory suit, holding a tablet. She smiled slightly when she saw Brandon arrive shortly after. He too displayed the confidence of someone who believes he has the room under control. They exchanged a knowing look, sitting side by side in the center of the table. Ashley, in a low, mocking voice. Do you think it's because of yesterday's recruitment? Perhaps Mr. Thompson wants to congratulate our selection. Brandon, sneering. I hope so. I recommended 3 perfect profiles, except the scholarship girl at the end. But at 8H00 pile, the sliding door opened, Jonathan Thompson entered, a sober figure, but an overwhelming presence. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, and advanced slowly to the head of the table, accompanied by Linda, his longtime assistant. In his hands, a navy blue folder, closed with a black elastic band. No one spoke. He didn't greet me. He didn't smile. He sat down, placed the file in front of him, and slowly looked at each person around the table, one by one, as if taking in the magnitude of what this meeting would mean. Then, calmly, he spoke. Jonathan, calm but sharp voice. Yesterday you conducted interviews. I'd like to hear your feedback. Who do you think deserves our attention? Ashley squared her shoulders, ready to shine. Ashley, assured. Well, we saw several very promising profiles. James Whitmore, son of the CEO of Lexington Capital. Lisa Morgan, Yale graduate, family of ambassadors. And there was also this young man, son of the governor of Pennsylvania. She rattled off names like a society catalog, citing family ties before even skills. Jonathan nodded silently. He listened to her until the end. Then his gaze hardened. His tone changed. Jonathan, staring at Ashley. And the last candidate, Maya Thompson? Didn't you find her remarkable? An awkward silence followed. Ashley glanced quickly at Brandon. He shrugged, visibly annoyed. Brandon, in a contemptuous tone. She didn't really have the Wellington profile. Not very presentable. Her CV wasn't bad, but it lacked that refinement. What we expect here. Ashley added defensively. We felt a lack of connection with our cultural standards. She seemed out of place. Jonathan stood up then. Slowly. He picked up the folder in front of him, untied the elastic, opened it, and spread the sheets out on the table, one by one. He read them aloud, turning the pages. Jonathan, calmly, but in a rising voice. Maya Thompson. Valedictorian in Applied Economics at Columbia. Summer internship at the IMF. Humanitarian project in Ghana, in partnership with UNESCO. Trilingual, English, French, Swahili. Letter of recommendation signed by the Dean of Columbia himself, who describes her as one of the brightest minds of her generation. He finally looked up at the room, freezing every glance. Jonathan, in a clear tone. Anne. Maya is my daughter. And shock crossed the room. You could have heard a pin drop. Brandon looked down, frozen. Ashley blanched, her tablet trembling slightly in her fingers. Around them, the other recruiters looked petrified. Jonathan took a few steps into the room, his hands clasped behind his back. Jonathan, low but sharp voice. You saw a black woman, wearing a modest suit and carrying a bag with no logo. You didn't see her intelligence. You didn't see her perseverance. You didn't even take the time to ask her a single technical question. He stopped in front of them, his gaze hard as glass around the room. Jonathan. What you demonstrated yesterday is not professionalism. It is prejudice, of class contempt, and total lack of discernment. You didn't just disrespect a candidate. You disrespected what this company claims to stand for, excellence. To earn it. Not to wear it on its birth certificate. He closed the file slowly. And said, turning to Linda. Jonathan. A complete review of the HR department begins today. Mandatory training on combating unconscious bias. Audit of all recruitments this year. Then, turning to Ashley and Brandon. Jonathan, in an icy tone. You two are suspended. Effective immediately. An internal investigation will determine whether your contract should be terminated for serious misconduct. And, without waiting for an answer, he left the room, leaving behind him a silence even heavier than when he arrived. A few weeks later, while returning from an interview at another company, Maya received a call. A polite, but warm, voice was heard on the other end of the line. Miss Thompson. This is Olivia Herrera, Director of International Strategy at Wellington and Chase. We've carefully reviewed your profile, and we'd like to offer you a permanent position on our team. Maya was silent for a moment, surprised. This wasn't a second interview. This wasn't a future promise. This was a firm offer. Not because of her father, Jonathan had kept his distance, true to his principles, but because other leaders, touched by his career and his skills, had asked to review the list of rejected candidates. Upon discovering his achievements, his humility, and the letter from the Dean of Columbia, several executives had pleaded in his favor. She accepted. Not with arrogance, but with the same discretion that had always defined her. And from her first day, she did what she had always done, she worked. Tirelessly. With rigor, humility, and impeccable ethics. During this time, Ashley E.T. Brandon, they had seen their name appear in a confidential internal report, entitled Silent Discrimination in the Recruitment Process. Their behavior was analyzed, discussed by the executive committee, and deemed incompatible with the values that Wellington and Chase claimed to defend. They left the company a few months later, quietly, without recommendation, and with a tarnished reputation in the industry. The years passed, Maya climbed the ladder, slowly but surely. She never asked for favors. She arrived early, left late. She listened more than she spoke. Her projects achieved results. She forged relationships with international clients, managed crises, and led mergers. Her calm inspired, her precision impressed. 10 years after that first day, in a conference room even larger than the one at its beginnings, the members of the Executive Council gathered for a historic announcement. Maya Thompson became the first black woman to serve on the executive board of Wellington and Chase. That day, her father, Jonathan, now retired, watched the ceremony in silence, sitting in the back row. His eyes shone, but he said nothing. He knew that Maya had earned her place on her own. She had done much more than survive the system, she had transcended it. And every year, during the recruitment days, when she spoke to the HR team, she always repeated the same sentence, with a soft but firm voice, looking straight into the eyes of the young recruiters. Talent doesn't always wear a fancy suit. Sometimes it just wears a dream, and an indestructible determination. Learn to recognize it. And in every look that met his, one felt that none of his words were theoretical. She was living proof.